our last presenter, Paul McShane, and I appreciate all your patience with this. Paul is Community Liaison and Development Manager at Chevalier College, a role he started in 2012, background in marketing, fundraising and business development, both in the public and private sectors. As part of his work, he's obtained $1.5 million in government funding for the first two stages of the Highlands Trade Skills Training Hub, and the project being presented today represents stage 3 of that concept. Paul is active in the Southern Highlands community, working with organisations like Rotary and as president of the Southern Highlands Youth Arts Council. Paul has also earned some notoriety, along with his daughter Melissa, as the original driving force behind the recognition of the Ballroom Township as being the birthplace of Mary Poppins.
Noel assures me I'm lucky last, so let's see how we go. Yes, I'm representing actually today, speaking on behalf of the Economic Summit Learning Group, and it's important to know that any market economy, learning is right at its fundamental nature. I mean, the discovery of market, the product of prices, of distribution, learning is the process by which a market works. And so we think we're the most important group, which is why Noel's put us last. And a few of us are photographed there. We won't have time to go through all of that though, so we'll press on. There's my contact details. There is a handout in the foyer, I think, still. I'm speaking on behalf of Chevalier College. For those of you who don't know, Chevalier College is the largest secondary school in the Highlands. It was founded in 1946, originally as primarily a boarding school for boys, but it transitioned eventually to be a day school and a co-educational school. There's about 1,200 students, and we have over 12,000 past students, and they form a vast and valuable network for us, which is actually quite critical to this project. Probably our best known alumnus is John Fay, the former State Premier and Federal Minister, but there are many, many others, many of them at the peak of their professions. So the project I'm talking about is the Highland Trade Skills Training Hub Stage 3. The first two stages have already been built with the help of a federal government grant that I was primarily involved in obtaining in the last couple of years. We have a trade skill centre already for construction and primary industries, and already today a lot of these projects that I've heard about, I can see synergies and alliances that we could form there. Now the need for the Southern Highlands, a TAFE-style training, restaurant and events expo centre in the Highlands, well, there's lots of statistics I could show you, but let's just put up a map. And you can see there the distribution of TAFE training restaurants in this part of the state. And I guess you don't have to be too clever to look there and see that there's a gap between Wollongong, Goulburn, Nowra, Sydney, in Bowral. There's no facility of its type. And to make matters a little bit worse, a couple of years ago, some of you will be aware, but due to funding cutbacks, I guess, TAFE consolidated and withdrew the hospitality commercial cooking courses from Mossvale TAFE. So here we are with one of our prime industries based on tourism, on food, on all of this, and we do not have a teaching facility in this area. So our young people, often an entry-level pathway to employment, have to leave the area to get that training. Now, if you're a young person in the bright lights of Sydney, Canberra, Wollongong, Beacon, and you've got to go there to do your training, well, what are you going to do? So, we often bemoan the fact that we lose young people in this region. Here's a reason why. It's unlikely to change. The funding situation seems pretty much set in concrete, and if anything, it's probably going to get worse because TAFE clearly is struggling with this new environment. It's a very difficult environment that they face. So we have that black spot there. Now, we're trying to do something about it at Chev. We do have some current courses, but we earlier this year signed a memorandum of understanding with TAFE that if we can build a facility and justify a market, then TAFE is prepared to look at returning and teaching. Now, if they don't, we think there are plenty of private providers that we could talk to, but something needs to give. Now, the accommodation and food services industry, just quickly, is a very important part of our world. Just a few quick facts. It employs over 2,500 people. In the Wingecarribee Shire, it represents nearly 20% above the industry average for employment, so it's critically weighting-wise, a very important part of our shire and our economy. Interesting, in Wallandilly, it's below, so there's an opportunity perhaps for some upskilling there. And there's over $200 million in annual output, and they're figures from a few years ago. I suspect it's growing and getting even bigger with some of the projects we've heard today. At the heart of this project is a place called Riversdale. For those who don't know, Riversdale is the property that Chev is based on, 100 acres there at Ballroom. Riversdale House is the original property that predates the college. It was built about 1875, and what makes it of interest in many ways is that it was built by an architect called Horbury Hunt. Now, Horbury Hunt, a bit like Shelley Boyce 100 years later, was a Canadian who came to this land and revolutionised Australian architecture. This is Horbury pictured there with his family outside his home, which he designed and built up in Sydney. It was demolished to make way for New South Head Road in the 1920s. It's Riversdale House on the Chev property, which was built around the same time, is actually a very close representation, as you can see, of his house. So it's the only example remaining of his domestic architecture. So for that reason, it would instantly be put on the State Heritage Register. We haven't done that, primarily because there's a lot of rules that come with that, and there's not a lot of funding, frankly, that gets attached to it, and we think we might have to find a better way of attacking that. So in addition to the original house, later on there was a ballroom added. Now, the ballroom was converted in 1946 to the Riversdale Chapel, and that served as the college's chapel up until the 1970s, when a modern chapel was built with larger seating. But back in the day, Riversdale House was the centre of social events in Ballroom, and during particularly the Edwardian era, it was where all the weddings and social events of that day seemed to take place. It was owned by Henry Osborne of Osborne Road fame, so it's got some real significance for our region. Now, our idea is that there are gems. Here are some stained glass windows that are in the building, representing the four seasons. Very appropriate for a lot of the food talk we've heard today. And in addition to that, some beautiful timber work, staircases and all sorts of things. Now, this is a little gem that has never been open to the public. Here's the investment vision that we have in mind. Essentially, what happened in 46 was the college added a lot of World War II huts, essentially, to Riversdale House, and added some other stuff on, which frankly wrecked the authenticity of the architecture. They were meant as temporary at the time, they're still there. Our view is that what we should be doing is looking at a modern building, which would be a training restaurant and an event centre as well, that would stand apart from Riversdale House but be sympathetic to it. It would be linked together, and together the two would provide, you can see there, get this working, okay, so there's Riversdale House. There's some areas around here that would be taken away to restore it to its original look. There's a breezeway through there to the chapel, and this would be the new centre here. So this would be a facility that could take around 220 people. This area here would be converted to gallery and boutique function space, so for private dining, for small functions and that type of thing, and also, as I say, for a gallery space. There's a croquet court, which is here. Now, already we have lots of past student weddings. There would be an opportunity to have a lot more and actually have the wedding functions here at the college. And this would be a training venue. The caterers would be required who operate there to actually provide training placement and work experience for hospitality students. So that, in essence, is the space that we're talking about for the Riversdale Hospitality Education Centre. Now, what's our secret sauce? Why would this make a good business proposition? Well, the first reason is we have this marvellous Chev community. If you imagine 1,200 families, their siblings, parents, grandparents, etc. And we have this going back 70 years. So we have an embedded market already there. I mean, we currently pump out nearly 200 prospective weddings a year. And if we actually could offer packages at a reasonable price, for these students to come back and be married at the college that they went to, and many love, then we think that that's a pretty good market to begin with, let alone the family functions, anniversaries, 21st, all those sorts of things that could result. So that's one part of it, that fantastic network that we have. The old boys who come back and want to have their private reunion in Riversdale House, because the class of 1955's only got 20 left or something like that. So that's one ingredient. The other ingredient is the site itself. There's 100 acres in the heart of Ballroom, in the heart of the Highlands. And you can see there that that's the main school precinct, but the rest of the precinct, which is owned by the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, we have these playing fields here, but there's a 14-hectare farm space, and many of the projects I've been hearing about today could actually have a lot of synergy with what we're doing and what we're planning here. Now, the other thing, in addition to the Riversdale House, which is what we're actually going to be seeking funding for, and I've got to confess that we will probably be going mainly to our past students for both philanthropic gifts but also investment in Riversdale House. But the school of its own bat, in the next 2 years, we'll be putting together 2 major new buildings. The first one is a total rebuild of our Performing Arts Centre. It's being designed by the preeminent theatre architect in Australia, Marshall Day, who are consulting from Victoria. This will be a 375-seat theatre. It'll have digital broadcasting capability as well, so we'll be able to have TEDx talks, we'll be able to do all sorts of wonderful stuff there. In addition to that, we're building, there's a few details from the new centre. We'll also be duplicating, those of you who were at McGrath Hall for that sort of talk fest that we had earlier in the Economic Summit process, this will be a new hall that's going to be built. Major expo space. There's going to be 1,200 seating, retractable seating in there, as well as the arena space. So those facilities will be built, and they'll be wonderful assets to the region. So we've identified niche markets. We've identified weddings. We've got chapels there. We've got lovely lakes, other facilities that we can use there. We have the reunions and parties that I spoke about. We also think that once Riversdale House is open, there's the prospect for galleries, tours, lunches, groups coming in, probus groups, that sort of thing. It's on the fringe of the school, the main school, so that can happen without any major impact on the school. The other market that I'm sure is going to interest a few people here is cycling. We think that this area, being the epicentre of cycling, we could run 60-odd clubs that are in New South Wales, Victoria, etc. These clubs would come to Chev, stay in our dormitories. These are our former boarding dorms. They're vacant. There's lots of space there that we occasionally use for cricket camps and things like that. But if we actually had them available for ongoing use, we could have all sorts of workshops, hospitality and cooking, permaculture, construction, you name it, we could do it there. So there's that sort of thing. Now, the other interesting one is that criterium cycling is the most popular form of cycling in North America and Europe. Not that popular in Australia because we don't have the facilities. But that's because you've got to close down city streets and, it's expensive and dangerous to do. Within Chev, we could have not just one track, that's a 1.1 kilometre track built on our existing road network mainly, but there's the possibility for even, a series of tracks that could make up. And so you could have a marvellous cycling expo there. The indicative investment structure to build this, we've had it costed. We're 1.5 million for the actual building. I think it'll be a bit more than that now for the new building. So we're thinking of a convertible note structure at, say, 2.5 million. That will directly fund the building, which obviously will then start to pay back those convertible notes. But in addition to that, that'll open up all of those markets that I mentioned, the niche markets there. In addition to that, we're looking at also having income from the Performing Arts Centre and the multi-purpose halls and expo facilities, also driving the investment return. So we've built out a number of investment scenarios there. Each of those pillars there, we're building those out. We've just been accepted into the Regional Development Institute Accelerator program, so we start that next week with this project. We're looking forward to that. So we're aiming at a target to have net income after cost of about $500,000 a year returning to investors and obviously eventually the college as well. So expressions of interest are invited. We're looking for a range of different, not just money, which would be nice, or investors, but partners, industry alliances, all those sorts of things. Thank you very much.